bad. Chapter 9, The Druids. We heard in 1928 of a Druid celebration at Stonehenge. Shortly afterwards, we read of another, an initiation ceremony at Penzance, where 12 bards of Britain, including Sir Arthur Quiller Couch, the author, were initiated by the Archdruid of Wales into a sect revived after a lapse of 2,000 years. Some of us might prefer the lapse to have continued, and as the subject of the Druid mysteries is here relevant, we quote verbatim the chapter entitled The Druids, and from Mr. Charles William Heckthorne's interesting book, Secret Societies of All Ages and Countries. The secret doctrines of the Druids were much the same as those of the Gymnosophists and Brahmins of India, the Magi of Persia, the priests of India, and of all the other priests of antiquity. Like them, they had two sets of religious doctrines, exoteric and esoteric. Their rites were practiced in Britain and Gaul, though they were brought to a much greater perfection in the former country, where the Isle of Angeli was considered their chief seat. The word Druid is generally supposed to be derived from an oak, which tree was particularly sacred among them, though its etymology may also be found in the Gaelic word drua, a wise man or magician. The temples wherein the sacred fire was preserved were generally situate on eminences and in dense groves of oaks and assumed various forms. The datum or ark of the mysteries was called a cromlech and was used as the sacred pastos or place of regeneration. It consisted of 3 upright stones as supporters of a broad flat stone laid across them on the top so as to form a small cell. Kite Coty's house in Kent was such a pastos. Considerable space, however, was necessary for the machinery of initiation in its largest and most comprehensive scale. Therefore, the Coer city, where the mysteries of Druidism were performed, consisted of a range of buildings adjoining the temple and containing apartments of all sizes, cells, vaults, baths, and long and artfully contrived passages with all the apparatus of terror used on these occasions. Most frequently, these places were subterranean. The system of Druidism embraced every religious and philosophical pursuit then known in these islands. The rites bore an undoubted reference to astronomical facts. Their chief deities are reducible to 2, a male and a female, the greater father and mother, who and Saradwin, distinguished by the same characteristics as belong to Osiris and Isis. Bacchus and Ceres, or any other supreme god and goddesses representing the 2 principles of all being. The grand periods of initiation were quarterly and determined by the course of the sun and his arrival at the equinoctial and solstitial points. But the time of the annual celebration was May-Eve, when fires were kindled on all the cairns and cromlechs throughout the island, which burned all night to introduce the sports of May Day, not midday, whence all the national sports formerly or still practiced date their origin. May Day is an important one, just something popped out. Of course it is. Everyone who pays attention knows May is an important day or month. May Day, all that shit. Pay attention. Round these fires, choral dances were performed in honor of the sun, who, at this season, was figuratively said to rise from his tomb. The festival was licentious and continued till the luminary had attained his meridian height, when priests and attendants retired to the woods where the most disgraceful orgies were perpetrated. But the solemn initiations were performed at midnight and contained 3 degrees, the first or lowest being the Ubates, the second, the bards, and the third, the druids. The candidate was first placed in the pastos bed, or coffin, where his symbolical death represented the death of Hu, or the sun. and his restoration in the third degree symbolized by the resurrection of the sun. He had to undergo trials and tests of courage similar to those practiced in the mysteries of other countries, and which therefore need not be detailed here. The Druids taught the doctrines of one supreme being, a future state of rewards and punishments, the immortality of the soul, and the metempsychosis. Their doctrines were chiefly those of Pythagoras. Their authority in many cases exceeded that of the monarch. They were, of course, the sole interpreters of religion, and consequently superintended all sacrifices, for no private person was allowed to offer a sacrifice without their sanction. They possessed the power of excommunication, which was the most horrible punishment that could be inflicted next to that of death, and from the effects of which the highest magistrate was not exempt. The great council of the realm was not competent to declare war or conclude peace without their occurrence. They determined all disputes by a final and unalterable decision, and had the power of inflicting the punishment of death, and indeed their altars streamed with the blood of human victims, holocausts of men, women, and children enclosed in large towers of wicker work, where sometimes sacrificed as burnt offering to their superstitions, which were at the same time intended to enhance the consideration of the priests, who were an ambitious race delighting in blood. The Druids, it is said, preferred such as had been guilty of theft, robbery, or other crimes as most acceptable to their gods, but when there was a scarcity of criminals, they made no scruple to supply their place with innocent persons. These dreadful sacrifices were offered by the Druids for the public on the eve of a dangerous war, or in the time of any national calamity, and for their particular persons of high rank when they were afflicted with any dangerous disease. The priestesses, clothed in white and wearing a metal girdle, foretold the future from the observation of natural phenomena, but more especially from human sacrifices. For them was reserved the frightful task of putting to death the prisoners taken in war, and individuals condemned by the Druids, and their arguaries were drawn from the manner in which the blood issued from the many wounded inflicted, and also from the smoking entrails. Many of these priestesses maintained a perpetual virginity. Others gave themselves upon the most luxurious excesses. As the Romans gained ground in these islands, the power of the Druids gradually declined, and they were finally assailed by Suetonius Paulinus, governor of Britain under Nero, AD 61. In their stronghold, the Isle of Angelaise, and entirely defeated the conqueror, consuming many of them in the fires which they had kindled for burning the Roman prisoners they had expected to make. A very just retaliation upon these sanguinary priests. But though their dominion was thus destroyed, many of their religious practices continued much longer. And so late in the 11th century, in the reign of Canute, it was necessary to forbid the people to worship the sun, moon, fires, etc. Certainly many of the practices of the Druids are still adhered to in Freemasonry, and some writers on this order endeavor to show that it was established soon after the Edict of Canute, and that as thereby the Druidical worship was prohibited in toto, the strongest oaths were required to bind the initiated to secrecy. There is no mystery as to the existence in Berlin of the Druidonian today. It is a branch of Freemasonry, and its sovereign Grand Master, until late, was Dr. Huby Schlinden. That's it.